The morning had started like any other travel day for 12-year-old Tyrell and his Aunt Lisa. They had woken up early, double-checked their luggage, and made it to the airport with plenty of time to spare. Tyrell was excited about the trip to visit his grandparents in Atlanta. It had been almost a year since he'd seen them last, and his grandmother had promised to make his favorite sweet potato pie. After getting through security without any issues, Tyrell and Lisa grabbed breakfast at one of the airport restaurants. Tyrell had pancakes with extra syrup while Lisa sipped her coffee and checked their boarding passes one more time. "Gate B-17, she said, looking at her watch. "We should head over there now. They'll start boarding in about 20 minutes. Tyrell nodded, his mouth still full of pancakes. He quickly finished his breakfast and they made their way to the gate. The waiting area was already filling up with other passengers. A business traveler typed furiously on his laptop. A couple with a toddler tried to keep their little one entertained. A group of college students laughed loudly at something on one of their phones. Lisa and Tyrell found 2 empty seats near the boarding gate. Tyrell pulled out his tablet to play a game while they waited, and Lisa scrolled through her phone, answering a few work emails. When the boarding announcement came, they joined the line with the other passengers. Lisa handed over their boarding passes to the gate agent, who scanned them and smiled. "Have a great flight," the agent said, and they walked down the jetway to the plane. As they stepped onto the aircraft, they were greeted by a flight attendant with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her name tag read Diane Reynolds. Tyrell smiled politely as he passed by, but the flight attendant barely glanced at him. They found their seats in row 22. Lisa had the aisle seat and Tyrell had the middle. The window seat was already occupied by an elderly man who smiled kindly and shifted to make room for Tyrell. "First time flying?" the man asked as Tyrell buckled his seatbelt. "No, sir," Tyrell replied. "I've flown a few times. My grandparents live in Atlanta, and we try to visit them whenever we can." The old man nodded approvingly. "Well, you're very polite. Your parents must be proud." Tyrell smiled. "Thank you." He didn't bother to explain that his parents had died in a car accident when he was 4, and his Aunt Lisa had raised him ever since. It was too complicated to get into with a stranger, even a nice one. Other passengers continued to board, filling up the plane. A white family with 2 boys around Tyrell's age took the row behind them. The boys were loud, arguing over who would get the window seat and kicking the backs of the seats in front of them until their mother told them to settle down. The plane was nearly full when a flight attendant's voice came over the intercom, announcing that they would be closing the doors soon. Tyrell had just taken out his headphones when he felt a tap on his shoulder. He looked up to see Diane Reynolds, the flight attendant who had greeted them earlier, standing in the aisle next to his seat. "Excuse me," she said, her voice clipped and professional. "There seems to be an issue with your seating assignment. I need you to come with me." Tyrell looked at his aunt in confusion. Lisa frowned. "What kind of issue?" Lisa asked. "We checked in online yesterday and got our boarding passes this morning. Everything was fine." The flight attendant's smile tightened even more. "I'm afraid there's been a computer error. This seat has been double booked." Lisa looked around the nearly full plane. "So what's the solution? Are you going to move us to different seats?" "Not both of you," Diane replied, her eyes fixed on Tyrell rather than Lisa. "Just him. He'll need to take a different flight." The elderly man in the window seat looked up in surprise. "That doesn't sound right," he said. "The boy was here first. If there's a booking error, shouldn't the later passenger be the one to move?" Diane ignored him, focusing on Tyrell. "You'll need to come with me now," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. But Lisa wasn't having it. "He's 12 years old. He's not flying by himself. We booked these tickets together and we're staying together." Tyrell felt his heart pounding. He hadn't done anything wrong, but the way the flight attendant was looking at him made him feel like he had. He looked over his shoulder and saw that the 2 boys in the row behind them were watching with wide eyes. "What's the actual problem here?" Lisa asked, her voice growing firmer. "Because I've been on plenty of flights with seating issues, and they always get resolved without kicking people off the plane, especially children." By now, several nearby passengers were watching the exchange. Diane seemed to notice the attention and lowered her voice. "It's company policy," she said vaguely. "In cases of overbooking, certain passengers may be asked to take a later flight." "Certain passengers?" Lisa repeated. And how exactly are these certain passengers selected? Before Diane could answer, another passenger a few rows up raised her hand. "Excuse me," the woman called out. "My son's seat was also apparently double booked, but the other flight attendant just found him another seat in first class." The woman pointed to a blond boy of about 10, who was now sitting in the premium cabin, happily sipping an orange juice. Diane's face flushed. "That's a different situation," she insisted. "How so?" Lisa pressed. "Please explain the difference to me." Tyrell sank lower in his seat, wishing he could disappear. He hated being the center of attention like this. Some of the passengers were pulling out their phones now, and Tyrell realized with a sinking feeling that they were recording the confrontation. "I don't have to explain airline policy to you," Diane said, her voice growing increasingly tense. "I just need you to comply with my request." Lisa pulled out her phone. "Actually, you do need to explain, because from where I'm sitting it looks like my nephew is being singled out and I want to understand why." She started recording the interaction. Diane's expression hardened when she saw the phone. "Recording is not permitted on this aircraft." "That's not true," called out another passenger, a man in a business suit. "I fly this airline every week and there's no policy against recording." Not during boarding. More passengers were getting involved now, several of them openly questioning Diane's actions. The elderly man beside Tyrell spoke up again. "I've been watching," he said, his voice carrying despite his age. "The only passengers being asked to move are people of color. That young boy up in first class who got his seat fixed is white. This young man here who's being told to get off the plane is black. See a pattern?" Diane's face was completely red now. "This has nothing to do with I would never." She stopped, collected herself, and said, "This is a security issue now. I need to get the captain." She hurried away toward the front of the plane. Tyrell looked at his aunt, his eyes wide with worry. "Are we going to get in trouble?" he whispered. Lisa put her arm around his shoulders. "No, honey. You didn't do anything wrong. But I'm not letting them treat you like this." One of the boys in the row behind them leaned forward. "That lady is mean," he said to Tyrell. "My brother and I were making way more noise than you, and she didn't say anything to us." His mother shushed him, looking embarrassed, but then added, "He's right, though. This doesn't seem fair at all." A few minutes later, Diane returned with the captain, a tall man with gray hair and a serious expression. By this point, nearly half the passengers in their section of the plane were watching and listening. "What seems to be the problem here?" the captain asked, looking between Diane and Lisa. Lisa explained the situation calmly, pointing out that Tyrell had been singled out while other passengers with similar seating issues had been accommodated. Several passengers chimed in to confirm her account, including the mother of the boy who had been upgraded to first class. The captain listened, then turned to Diane with a questioning look. She stammered something about procedure and security protocols, but couldn't seem to articulate a clear reason for her actions. After a moment of consideration, the captain addressed Lisa. "Ma'am, I apologize for the confusion. There appears to have been a misunderstanding. You and your nephew are welcome to stay in your assigned seats." Relief washed over Tyrell, but it was short-lived. Diane stepped closer to the captain and whispered something urgently. The captain's expression changed and he cleared his throat. "However," he continued, "due to the delay this has caused and the situation that has developed, I'm going to have to ask both of you to deplane so we can sort this out properly. We'll make sure you're rebooked on the next available flight to Atlanta, which leaves in 2 hours." "What?" Lisa said in disbelief. "So we're being kicked off anyway? After you just said there was a misunderstanding?" "It's for the best," the captain insisted. "We need to get this flight moving, and this has already caused a significant delay." The elderly man beside Tyrell spoke up again. "So instead of addressing the real problem here, you're punishing the victims?" "That's not right, Captain. Not right at all." Other passengers began to voice their agreement, many of them openly recording now. Tyrell felt tears forming in his eyes, but he blinked them back, determined not to cry in front of everyone. With no choice left, Lisa gathered their things and they made their way off the plane, followed by the apologetic murmurs of fellow passengers and the cold stare of Diane Reynolds. As they walked back up the jetway, Tyrell heard the commotion continuing behind them, with several passengers demanding to speak to airline representatives. What Tyrell and Lisa didn't know as they headed back to the terminal was that their experience would soon reach far beyond this airport. The videos taken by other passengers were already being uploaded, and by morning, millions of people would witness what had happened on Flight 237. Lisa held Tyrell's hand tightly as they walked back through the jetway and into the terminal. Her face was calm, but Tyrell could feel the tension in her grip. He'd seen this look before, the one his aunt wore when she was trying not to show how angry she really was. "Are we still going to see Grandma and Grandpa today?" Tyrell asked quietly. Lisa took a deep breath before answering. "I'm going to do everything I can to make sure we get to Atlanta today. Don't you worry about that." They approached the customer service desk where a harried-looking airline employee named Greg was typing at his computer. He glanced up as they approached. "How can I help you folks today?" he asked. "We were just removed from Flight 237 to Atlanta," Lisa explained, keeping her voice level. "The captain said we would be rebooked on the next available flight." Greg looked confused. "Removed from the flight? Was there some kind of issue?" "You could say that," Lisa replied. She briefly explained what had happened with the flight attendant, Diane Reynolds, and how they had been asked to deplane despite the captain acknowledging there had been a misunderstanding. Greg frowned as he listened. "That doesn't sound right at all. Let me see what I can do for you." He began typing on his keyboard. While they waited, Tyrell noticed a small crowd forming near the gate they had just left. Several passengers from their flight appeared to be arguing with another airline employee. "Looks like we weren't the only ones upset about what happened," Lisa murmured, following Tyrell's gaze. 3 people broke away from the group and headed toward the customer service desk. Tyrell recognized them from the plane. The elderly man who had been sitting in their row, the mother of the 2 boys who had sat behind them, and the businessman who had spoken up about the recording policy. "Excuse me," the elderly man said as he approached. "My name is Howard Chen. I was sitting next to this young man on the flight. What happened back there was completely unacceptable." The woman introduced herself as Nicole. "I have the whole thing recorded on my phone," she said, holding up her device. "That flight attendant singled out this boy while letting my kids stay on the plane. It was blatant discrimination, plain and simple." The businessman, who introduced himself as David, nodded in agreement. "I've been flying with this airline for 15 years as a platinum member, and I've never seen anything like this. I've already called my attorney." Greg looked increasingly alarmed as he listened to them. Let me get my supervisor," he said, picking up a phone. Tyrell shifted uncomfortably as more people began to gather around them. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, and all the angry voices were making him anxious. Lisa seemed to sense his discomfort and put her arm around his shoulders. "It's okay," she whispered to him. "These people are trying to help us." A few minutes later, a woman in a crisp navy suit approached the desk. Her name tag identified her as Valerie Torres, customer service manager. "I understand there was an incident on Flight 237, she said, her voice professionally concerned. "Can someone explain what happened?" Before Lisa could speak, several passengers began talking at once, each eager to share what they had witnessed. Valerie held up her hands. "One at a time, please," she said firmly. "Let's start with the people directly involved." Lisa stepped forward and calmly recounted the events on the plane. As she spoke, Howard, Nicole, and David occasionally added details or confirmed parts of her story. Tyrell stood quietly beside his aunt, feeling both embarrassed and grateful for the support of these strangers. "And I have it all right here," Nicole said when Lisa finished, holding up her phone again. "Do you want to see it?" Valerie nodded and Nicole played the video. Tyrell couldn't see the screen from where he was standing, but he could hear his own voice sounding small and confused, and Diane Reynolds' increasingly defensive responses. When the video ended, Valerie's professional demeanor had noticeably cooled. "Ms. Reynolds' behavior was completely unacceptable and does not reflect our airline's values or policies. I want to personally apologize to you and your nephew." She turned to Tyrell. "Young man, I am truly sorry for what you experienced today." Tyrell nodded, unsure what to say. Lisa spoke up. "We appreciate the apology, but we still need to get to Atlanta today. Tyrell's grandparents are expecting us." "Of course," Valerie said quickly. "Greg, please book Ms. Parker and her nephew on the next flight to Atlanta. First-class seats." Greg nodded and began typing rapidly. "Additionally," Valerie continued, "I'd like to offer you vouchers for future travel and meal vouchers you can use while you wait for your new flight." "That's all well and good," Howard said, crossing his arms. But what about the bigger issue here? What's going to happen to that flight attendant? Yeah, Nicole added. My boys were making way more noise than this child, but they didn't get kicked off. The only difference was the color of their skin. That's not right, other passengers murmured in agreement, and Tyrell noticed that several of them had their phones out, recording the confrontation at the customer service desk. Valerie looked increasingly uncomfortable. I assure you that we take these allegations very seriously. We have a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind. This incident will be fully investigated. It shouldn't need investigation, David said firmly. We all saw what happened. There were at least a dozen witnesses and multiple videos. What more evidence do you need? Just then, Tyrell spotted a familiar face approaching from the direction of the gate. It was Diane Reynolds, the flight attendant who had tried to remove him from the plane. She was walking quickly, her face flushed, followed by the captain and another flight attendant. The crowd around the customer service desk noticed them too, and a murmur ran through the group. Nicole stepped forward, her phone still recording. There she is, she said loudly. That's the flight attendant who discriminated against this child. Diane stopped short when she saw the crowd, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. The captain put a hand on her shoulder and whispered something to her, but she shook her head. I need to clear this up, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. She approached the desk, ignoring the hostile stares of the passengers. Ms. Torres, she said, addressing the manager. I need to explain what happened on that flight. There was a legitimate seating issue and I was following protocol. Was the protocol to only enforce it with certain passengers? Howard asked pointedly. Diane's face reddened further. I was not discriminating against anyone. There was a security concern. What security concern? Lisa interrupted. My nephew was sitting quietly in his assigned seat. He hadn't done anything wrong. I received information, Diane began, but the captain cut her off with a warning look. Ms. Reynolds, I think it would be best if we discuss this in private, he said firmly. Valerie nodded in agreement. Captain Taylor is right. Ms. Reynolds, let's continue this conversation in my office. The rest of the flight crew should return to the aircraft. Your passengers are waiting. The captain hesitated, looking troubled. The thing is, Ms. Torres, several passengers have refused to fly with Ms. Reynolds as their flight attendant. They're demanding she be removed from the flight. A ripple of surprise went through the crowd. Tyrell glanced at his aunt, whose eyebrows had shot up in amazement. How many passengers are we talking about? Valerie asked. At least 20, possibly more, the captain admitted. They're saying they don't feel comfortable with someone who would discriminate against a child. Valerie closed her eyes briefly, as if praying for patience. When she opened them, her professional smile was back in place, but it looked strained. Captain Taylor, please return to your aircraft. Tell your passengers that Ms. Reynolds will not be serving on this flight. We'll send a replacement flight attendant immediately. She turned to Diane. Ms. Reynolds, come with me. Diane looked like she wanted to protest, but after a moment, she nodded stiffly and followed Valerie away from the desk. As they walked away, Tyrell heard Diane say, This isn't fair. I was just doing my job. We'll discuss what your job actually entails in my office, Valerie replied, her voice cold. Once they were gone, the tension in the air seemed to dissipate slightly. Greg cleared his throat. Ms. Parker, I've booked you and Tyrell on Flight 412 to Atlanta, departing at 2:15 p.m. from Gate C-22. That's about 2 hours from now. You've been upgraded to first class, and here are your new boarding passes and meal vouchers. Lisa took the documents with a nod of thanks. We appreciate your help and the support of everyone here, she said, looking around at the passengers who had stood up for them. Howard patted Tyrell gently on the shoulder. You handled yourself well, young man. Not everyone would have stayed so calm in that situation. Thank you, Tyrell said quietly. He was still processing everything that had happened, but he felt a little better knowing that so many people had recognized the injustice and spoken up about it. Nicole approached with her phone. I hope you don't mind, but I posted part of the video on social media. People need to see this kind of thing so it doesn't keep happening. She hesitated, then added, I can take it down if you're uncomfortable with it. Lisa considered this for a moment. No, leave it up. People should know. She turned to Tyrell. Is that okay with you? Tyrell thought about it. The idea of strangers watching a video of him being kicked off a plane was embarrassing, but maybe it would help stop something similar from happening to someone else. It's okay, he said finally. Lisa squeezed his shoulder proudly. Come on, let's use these vouchers and get something to eat while we wait for our new flight. As they walked away from the customer service desk, David called after them. I'm sending the video to my contacts at the news stations. This story needs to be told. Lisa raised a hand in acknowledgement but didn't look back. Tyrell could tell she was tired, though she was trying not to show it. Are you okay, Aunt Lisa? He asked as they walked toward the food court. She looked down at him with a small smile. I'm fine, baby. Just angry that you had to go through that. But I'm proud of how you handled it. I didn't really do anything, Tyrell said with a shrug. You stayed calm and dignified. That's not nothing. She ruffled his hair affectionately. Now let's get some lunch and try to salvage what's left of this day, okay? Tyrell nodded, feeling a little better. As they sat down to eat, neither of them realized that the videos from the plane were already beginning to spread online like wildfire, or that by the time they landed in Atlanta, Tyrell's face would be recognized by millions of people across the country. Tyrell and Lisa's flight to Atlanta was peaceful compared to the morning's chaos. The first-class seats were comfortable, and the flight attendants went out of their way to be kind and attentive. One of them, an older woman named Gloria, even brought Tyrell an extra dessert with a sympathetic smile. I heard about what happened this morning, she whispered. Not all of us are like that, honey. Tyrell just nodded, still feeling uncomfortable with the attention. He was tired and just wanted to get to his grandparents' house where things would feel normal again. When they landed in Atlanta, Lisa turned on her phone and immediately frowned at the screen. Everything okay? Tyrell asked as they waited for the plane to reach the gate. I've got about 50 text messages, Lisa said, scrolling through her notifications, and a bunch of missed calls. Something's going on. As soon as they were allowed to leave their seats, Lisa and Tyrell made their way off the plane and into the busy Atlanta airport. Lisa was still looking at her phone with a worried expression. What is it? Tyrell asked. Lisa looked up, her face a mix of surprise and concern. That video Nicole took, it's everywhere. It's been shared thousands of times already. We're trending. Tyrell's stomach dropped. What does that mean? Before Lisa could answer, her phone rang. It was Tyrell's grandmother. Mom? Yes, we just landed. Wait, slow down. You saw what? Lisa's eyes widened as she listened. It's on the news already? But how did they? No, we're fine. We'll tell you everything when we get there. We're heading to baggage claim now. She hung up and looked at Tyrell. Your grandparents saw us on the local news. Apparently, the video has gone viral and news stations picked it up. Is that bad? Tyrell asked quietly. Lisa put her arm around his shoulders as they walked. Not bad exactly, just more attention than we expected. She gave him a reassuring squeeze. Don't worry, it'll blow over soon. But Lisa was wrong about that. By the time they collected their luggage and found Tyrell's grandfather waiting for them at the arrivals area, the story had spread even further. Grandpa Joe gave Tyrell a big hug, then looked at Lisa with serious eyes. You two have stirred up quite a storm, he said as he led them to the parking garage. Your grandmother's been glued to the TV all afternoon. Even got a call from Pastor Williams asking if you were the same Lisa and Tyrell from the plane video. It's that big already? Lisa asked, sounding stunned. Bigger than big, Grandpa Joe replied, and getting bigger by the minute. As they drove to the house, Grandpa Joe explained that multiple videos from different passengers had been posted online. The hashtag Doinger Justice for Tyrell was trending nationally, and people were calling for a boycott of the airline. Tyrell sank lower in his seat, overwhelmed by the thought of so many strangers watching what had happened to him and talking about it online. He wasn't sure how to feel. Part of him was glad people cared about the unfair treatment, but another part just wanted to disappear. When they arrived at his grandparents' house, Grandma Pearlie was waiting on the porch. She wrapped Tyrell in a warm hug that smelled like cinnamon and her familiar perfume. My poor baby, she murmured, holding him tight. You must have been so scared. I'm okay, Grandma, Tyrell assured her, though he had to blink back tears. Something about his grandmother's embrace made all the emotions he'd been holding back suddenly feel very close to the surface. Inside, the TV was on, tuned to a news channel. Tyrell froze when he saw his own face on the screen. It was a still image from the video, showing him looking confused and upset as Diane Reynolds stood over him. The caption read, Discrimination at 30,000 feet, boy removed from flight. They've been running this story all afternoon. Grandma Pearlie said, picking up the remote to turn down the volume. Your phone's been ringing nonstop too, Lisa. I wrote down all the messages. Lisa picked up the notepad by the phone and flipped through several pages of messages. Her eyes widened as she read. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, all these people want interviews. There are even messages from 3 different lawyers offering to represent us pro bono. Grandpa Joe shook his head. It's not just the news either. Look at this. He opened his tablet and showed them a social media page where the video had been shared over 200,000 times. The comment section was filled with thousands of angry responses supporting Terrell and condemning the airline. This is too much, Lisa muttered, sinking onto the couch. I never expected anything like this. Terrell sat next to his aunt, feeling guilty. I'm sorry I caused all this trouble. Hey, Lisa said firmly, turning to face him. You didn't cause anything. That flight attendant's actions caused this. You have nothing to be sorry for, understand? Tyrell nodded, but he still felt uncomfortable with all the attention. Throughout dinner, the house phone and Lisa's cell phone kept ringing. Eventually, she turned her phone off and let the house phone go to the answering machine. They tried to have a normal family dinner, with Grandma Pearlie serving Tyrell's favorite foods and Grandpa Joe telling his usual silly jokes. But there was an underlying tension that wouldn't go away. After dinner, while Tyrell was helping his grandmother wash dishes, Lisa sat in the living room making calls. First to her boss, explaining why this might affect her work schedule for the next few days, then to a few close friends who had been trying to reach her all day. Finally, she called David, the businessman from the airport who had offered his help. The story's getting bigger than I can handle, she told him. I think we might need some advice on how to navigate all this. From the kitchen, Tyrell could hear bits and pieces of the conversation. Words like press statement and legal options floated his way as he dried plates and put them away. Your aunt's doing the right thing, Grandma Pearlie told him quietly. When something like this happens, you can't just let it slide. Too many people have let it slide for too many years. Tyrell nodded, remembering the conversations his aunt had with him about how to behave in public, how to talk to police officers, how to make sure people didn't see him as a threat. Conversations his white friends probably never had with their parents. After the dishes were done, Tyrell joined his family in the living room. They were watching the evening news, which was running an extended segment on the incident. The reporter was standing outside the airline's headquarters where a small group of protesters had gathered, with signs demanding justice, in addition to the video that has now been viewed millions of times online, the reporter was saying. We've obtained exclusive footage from another angle that shows the incident more clearly. A new video played, showing Diane Reynolds' face more clearly as she insisted that Terrell leave the plane. Her expression, which had seemed merely stern before, now looked openly hostile as she loomed over the 12-year-old boy. The airline issued a statement this afternoon, saying they are deeply concerned by the video and are conducting a thorough investigation. The reporter continued. But critics say this is part of a larger pattern of discrimination in the airline industry. The segment cut to an interview with a civil rights attorney who explained that this was far from an isolated incident. We've seen this happen repeatedly across different airlines, the attorney said. People of color being removed from flights for minor issues or for no reason at all, while similar behavior from white passengers goes unchallenged. Lisa turned off the TV and looked at Tyrell. How are you feeling about all this? Tyrell shrugged, unsure how to put his feelings into words. Weird, I guess. I don't like seeing my face on TV. I know, baby. But sometimes things happen for a reason. Maybe this needed to come to light. Your aunt's right, Grandpa Joe said. People need to see this stuff. It's the only way things will change. Just then, Lisa's phone, which she had turned back on to make her calls, pinged with a notification. She looked at the screen and her eyes widened. What is it now? Grandma Pearlie asked. It's an email from someone claiming to be a former colleague of Diane Reynolds, Lisa said slowly. They say she has a history of similar incidents that the airline has covered up. Let me see, Grandpa Joe said, taking the phone. He read the email carefully, then looked up with a grim expression. If this is true, it changes everything. This person says they're willing to go on record about at least 3 other incidents involving Ms. Reynolds and passengers of color. The room fell silent as they all absorbed this new information. What do we do now? Tyrell asked finally. Lisa took a deep breath. I think we need to talk to one of those lawyers who called. Not because we want money or anything, but because we need guidance. This is getting bigger than us and we need to make sure it's handled right. I agree, Grandma Pearlie said firmly. And I think Tyrell should stay home from school for a few days until this dies down a bit. I don't want him dealing with all that attention from other kids right now. Tyrell was secretly relieved. The thought of facing his classmates after they'd all seen him on the news was intimidating. As they continued discussing their next steps, Tyrell's phone buzzed with a text from his best friend back home. Just saw you on the news. You famous now. Everyone at school talking about it. You okay? Tyrell stared at the message, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. His private humiliation had become a public spectacle, a symbol of something much larger than himself. And somehow he was going to have to find a way to deal with it. He looked up at his family, all of them deep in conversation about the best way to handle the growing media storm. Despite the stress and confusion of the day, Tyrell felt a wave of gratitude for these people who were firmly in his corner, ready to stand up for him no matter what. Whatever happened next, he wouldn't face it alone. By the next morning, the story had grown even bigger. Tyrell woke up to the sounds of voices outside his grandparents' house. When he peeked through the curtains, he was shocked to see news vans parked along the street and reporters standing on the sidewalk. Don't open the blinds, Grandma Pearlie said, appearing at his bedroom door. They've been there since sunrise. Your aunt's been on the phone with a lawyer for the past hour. Tyrell followed his grandmother to the kitchen, where Lisa sat at the table with a notepad full of scribbled notes and a worried expression. Grandpa Joe was cooking breakfast, the smell of bacon and eggs filling the air as he hummed quietly to himself, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy. Morning, champ, he said to Tyrell. Hungry? Tyrell nodded, though his stomach felt tight with anxiety. He sat down at the table and Grandma Pearlie placed a glass of orange juice in front of him. We've hired an attorney, Lisa told him, setting down her phone. His name is Mr. Richardson and he's going to help us navigate all this. He's dealt with discrimination cases before. Are we suing the airline? Tyrell asked, his voice small. Lisa reached across the table and squeezed his hand. We're keeping all options open right now, but our main goal is to make sure what happened to you doesn't happen to anyone else. Grandpa Joe brought plates of food to the table, and they tried to have a normal family breakfast. But the constant ringing of the phones and the knowledge of the reporters outside made it impossible to relax. After breakfast, Lisa's phone rang again. She checked the screen and her eyebrows shot up. It's the airline, she said, looking surprised. She answered and put the call on speaker so everyone could hear. Hello, this is Lisa Parker. Ms. Parker, good morning. This is William Fletcher, CEO of Horizon Airlines. Lisa exchanged shocked glances with her family. Mr. Fletcher, I wasn't expecting to hear from you personally. Given the seriousness of the situation, I felt I needed to reach out directly, the CEO replied, his voice grave. First, I want to offer my deepest apologies to you, and especially to your nephew for the treatment you received on our flight yesterday. It was completely unacceptable. Lisa remained silent, waiting for him to continue. I've spent the morning reviewing all the videos and speaking with our staff. I've also called an emergency board meeting for this afternoon, but I didn't want to wait to contact you personally. I appreciate that, Lisa said cautiously, but I should tell you we've retained legal counsel. I understand completely, Fletcher said, and I respect that. I'm not calling to make any settlement offers or to try to sweep this under the rug. Quite the opposite. I want you to know that we're conducting a thorough investigation, and I promise you we will be transparent about our findings and actions. What kind of investigation? Grandpa Joe asked loudly. Is that a family member with you? Fletcher asked. Yes, my father-in-law, Lisa explained. We're on speakerphone. Sir, to answer your question, we're conducting a multifaceted investigation. We're reviewing Ms. Reynolds' entire employment history with us. We're interviewing all staff who worked with her. We're examining our complaint records to see if there were previous incidents that weren't properly addressed. And we're reviewing our training and policies to identify failures in our system. And what about Diane Reynolds? Lisa asked. What's happening with her? There was a pause on the line. Ms. Reynolds has been suspended pending the investigation. I can't say more than that at this time due to employment laws, but please know we're taking this very seriously. After a few more minutes of conversation, including Fletcher asking if there was anything the airline could do for them in the immediate term. Lisa politely declined. The call ended. "Well, that was unexpected," Grandma Pearlie said. "CEOs don't make calls like that unless they're really worried," Grandpa Joe observed. "This must be hurting their business already." Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "Mr. Richardson said the airline's stock dropped 7% yesterday after the videos went viral. They're in damage control mode." Just then Tyrell's phone buzzed with a text notification. It was from Nicole, the mother from the flight who had recorded the video. "Check your email," the message read. "I've been contacted by 3 other passengers who had problems with the same flight attendant. Sending you their stories." Tyrell showed the message to his aunt, who immediately checked her email. Sure enough, there was a message from Nicole with several forwarded emails attached. Lisa read through them, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "These are serious," she said finally, looking up at her family. "One man says Diane Reynolds accused him of being in the wrong seat, even though his boarding pass clearly showed he was correct. Another woman says Reynolds refused to serve her during the beverage service, skipping her completely. A third says Reynolds reported him to security for suspicious behavior, when all he was doing was reading a book in Arabic. All people of color?" Grandma Pearlie asked, though she already knew the answer. Lisa nodded grimly. "All people of color." She forwarded the emails to Mr. Richardson, then called him to discuss this new development. While she was on the phone, the house phone rang. Grandpa Joe answered it, had a brief conversation, then returned to the kitchen with raised eyebrows. "That was a reporter from the Washington Post," he announced. "They're doing a major story on discrimination in the airline industry and want to interview us. What did you tell them?" Lisa asked, covering the microphone on her cell phone. "I said we'd call back after speaking with our attorney," Grandpa Joe replied with a wink. Throughout the day, more information continued to emerge. David, the businessman who had spoken up on the plane, sent Lisa screenshots of conversations in a frequent flyer forum, where other passengers were sharing their own negative experiences with Diane Reynolds. Howard, the elderly man who had sat next to Tyrell, called to say he'd been contacted by the airline's investigation team and had given them a detailed account of what happened. By mid-afternoon, the family had retreated to the living room, where they were watching the ongoing news coverage of the incident. The story had evolved from a single viral video to a national conversation about racial bias in the airline industry and beyond. "The footage has sparked outrage across social media," a reporter was saying, with many people sharing their own experiences of discrimination while traveling. Horizon Airlines has seen its customer service lines flooded with calls, and a protest is planned at their headquarters tomorrow morning. The screen cut to an interview with a crisis management expert. "This is a textbook example of how quickly a single incident can escalate in the age of social media," the expert explained. "The airline's response in the next 24 to 48 hours will be crucial for their reputation." Just as the segment ended, Lisa's phone rang again. It was Mr. Richardson. "I've just gotten off the phone with the airline's legal team," he told her. "They want to set up a video call with you, Tyrell, and the CEO this evening. They say they have some important updates on their investigation they want to share directly." Lisa looked at Tyrell, covering the microphone. "Are you up for a video call with the airline CEO? You don't have to do it if you don't want to." Tyrell thought about it. Part of him wanted to hide from all this attention, but another part wanted to face it head on. After all, he hadn't done anything wrong. "I'll do it," he said finally. A few hours later, the family gathered around Lisa's laptop on the dining room table. Mr. Richardson had joined them in person, a tall man in a crisp suit who spoke in a calm, reassuring manner. As they waited for the video call to connect, he reminded them of the strategy they'd discussed. "Let them do most of the talking first," he advised. "We want to hear what they found and what actions they're planning to take. Don't make any commitments or accept any offers without discussing them with me first." The call connected, and William Fletcher appeared on screen, along with a woman he introduced as Beth Winters, the airline's chief of human resources, and another man named Thomas Powell, their chief legal officer. "Thank you for agreeing to this call," Fletcher began. "I want to update you on our investigation, which has been ongoing since yesterday morning." He explained that they had interviewed over a dozen staff members who had worked with Diane Reynolds, reviewed passenger complaints going back 5 years, and analyzed the security footage from the plane and terminal. "What we found is deeply troubling," Fletcher admitted. "There appears to be a pattern of behavior that went unaddressed despite multiple complaints. Our internal systems failed to flag these incidents properly, and managers didn't take appropriate action when concerns were raised." Beth Winter spoke next. "We've uncovered at least 7 previous incidents involving Ms. Reynolds, where passengers of color were treated differently than white passengers. In each case, the complaints were either dismissed as misunderstandings or handled with minor reprimands that didn't address the underlying issue." "And what about the other staff involved?" Lisa asked. "The captain who made us leave the plane even after acknowledging there was a misunderstanding?" Fletcher nodded grimly. "Captain Taylor has been interviewed as part of our investigation. He admits he was more concerned with keeping the flight on schedule than addressing the discrimination that was occurring. That represents another failure on our part. We've created a culture where on-time performance sometimes takes precedence over proper treatment of our passengers." Thomas Powell, the legal officer, leaned forward. "As a result of our preliminary findings, we've terminated Ms. Reynolds' employment, effective immediately. Captain Taylor has been suspended pending further review of his actions, and we're implementing a comprehensive overhaul of our complaint system and anti-bias training programs." Mr. Richardson nodded appreciatively, but remained professional. "Those are positive steps. What about the systemic issues that allowed this to happen in the first place?" "That's why I wanted to speak with you directly," Fletcher said, turning his attention to Tyrell. "Young man, what happened to you on our aircraft was wrong on every level. It should never have happened, and we failed you." "I'm truly sorry." Tyrell wasn't sure what to say, so he simply nodded. "We're announcing tomorrow that we're creating a new passenger advocacy program that will put special emphasis on ensuring equal treatment for all travelers." Fletcher continued. "With your permission, we'd like to name it after Tyrell." Tyrell's eyes widened in surprise. He looked at his aunt and Mr. Richardson, unsure how to respond. "That's a significant gesture," Mr. Richardson acknowledged. "But we'd need to see the details of this program before making any decisions about lending Tyrell's name to it." "Of course," Fletcher agreed quickly. "We'll send over the full proposal tomorrow. We're also prepared to offer a settlement, but that's a separate conversation we can have through proper channels. Right now, I just want to emphasize that we're committed to making real changes, not just handling a PR crisis." As the call continued, Tyrell found himself feeling conflicted. On one hand, he was still upset about what had happened and how it had turned his life upside down. On the other hand, it seemed like something good might come from it all, changes that could help other people avoid going through what he experienced. When the call ended, Mr. Richardson turned to the family. "They're taking this very seriously. The termination of Ms. Reynolds before the investigation is even complete tells me they found clear evidence of wrongdoing." "So what happens now?" Grandma Purley asked. "Now we review their proposal for this advocacy program," Mr. Richardson replied. "We discuss any settlement offer they make. And most importantly, we make sure they follow through on these promises of systemic change." Tyrell looked around at the adults, all of them discussing next steps and legal strategies. It was hard to believe that all of this had started with one morning on a plane less than 48 hours ago. His world had changed so quickly, in ways he couldn't have imagined. That night, as he lay in bed trying to sleep, Tyrell thought about what the CEO had said about naming a program after him. It felt strange to think that something good might come from such an awful experience, that his name might be attached to something that helped other people. He wasn't sure how he felt about it yet, but as he drifted off to sleep, he found himself hoping that whatever happened next would make a real difference. 1 month later, Tyrell stood nervously in the hotel conference room, adjusting the tie that his grandfather had helped him put on that morning. The room was filled with people in business attire, reporters with cameras, and airline executives looking solemn and attentive. "You ready for this?" Lisa asked, straightening his collar one last time. Tyrell nodded, though his stomach was doing flips. In the month since the incident on the plane, his life had changed in ways he never could have imagined. After several meetings with the airline executives and their legal team, a settlement had been reached. The terms included a substantial monetary compensation for Tyrell and Lisa, but more importantly, it included the airline's commitment to create and implement the Tyrell Parker Passenger Advocacy Program. Today was the official launch of that program, and Terrell had agreed to say a few words at the press conference.
He had practiced his short speech dozens of times with his family.
But standing here now, he wondered if he could actually go through with it. Remember, you don't have to do this if you don't want to, Lisa reminded him. No one would blame you if you changed your mind. Tyrell took a deep breath. I want to do it, he said. Like Grandpa Joe says, sometimes things happen for a reason. At that moment, William Fletcher, the airline CEO, approached them with a warm smile. Over the past month, they had spoken several times, and Tyrell had come to believe that the man was genuinely committed to making changes, not just managing a PR crisis. Tyrell, Lisa, thank you both for being here today, Fletcher said, shaking their hands. We're about to begin. Are you ready? Tyrell nodded, and they followed Fletcher to the front of the room where a podium had been set up. The murmur of conversation died down as Fletcher stepped up to the microphone. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this important announcement. As many of you know, 1 month ago, an incident occurred on one of our flights that exposed serious flaws in our training, our policies, and our culture. Fletcher spoke for several minutes about the changes the airline had made over the past month. Diane Reynolds had been terminated, and Captain Taylor had been required to undergo extensive retraining before being allowed to fly again. More importantly, the airline had revamped its complaint system, strengthened its anti-bias training, and created new protocols for handling seating issues. But the most significant change we're announcing today is the launch of the Tyrell Parker Passenger Advocacy Program, Fletcher said, turning to look at Tyrell with respect. This program will ensure that every passenger on our airlines is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their race, ethnicity, religion, or background. He explained how the program would work. A dedicated team of passenger advocates would be available at every major airport where the airline operated. These advocates would have the authority to intervene in situations where passengers felt they were being treated unfairly. Additionally, a new app feature would allow passengers to report concerns in real time. None of these changes would have happened without the courage of one young man and his family, Fletcher concluded. And now I'd like to introduce you to Tyrell Parker, whose experience has led to this important moment of change. Tyrell approached the podium, his knees feeling weak. The room seemed much bigger now with all those eyes on him. He glanced back at his family, Lisa, Grandma Pearlie, and Grandpa Joe, all watching him with proud smiles. Mr. Richardson, their attorney, gave him an encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, Tyrell began the speech he had prepared. Good morning. My name is Tyrell Parker. I'm 12 years old, and a month ago, I was kicked off a plane because of the color of my skin. He paused, surprised by how steady his voice sounded despite his nerves. What happened to me wasn't fair, but it wasn't just about me. It happens to people who look like me every day, in airports, in stores, in schools, everywhere. Most of the time, no one records it. No one shares it online. It just happens, and people have to deal with it alone. Tyrell glanced down at his notes, then continued. I didn't want to be famous for this. I just wanted to visit my grandparents. But now that people are listening, I want to say something important. This has to stop. Not just on airplanes, but everywhere. He looked up, making eye contact with the reporters and executives in the room. I believe Horizon Airlines is trying to make things better. The new program they're starting today is a good first step. But it's just one airline, and this problem is everywhere. So I'm asking every company, not just airlines, to look at how they treat people and make sure everyone is treated fairly. Tyrell ended his speech by thanking the passengers who had stood up for him on the plane, especially Howard, Nicole, and David, who had remained in touch with his family and had even flown in for today's event. When he finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. As Tyrell stepped back from the podium, Lisa gave him a tight hug, whispering, I'm so proud of you, in his ear. His grandparents were beaming, and even Mr. Richardson looked impressed. After the press conference, several reporters wanted to interview Tyrell, but Lisa limited it to just a few questions. They had learned to be careful about media exposure over the past month, trying to balance the importance of sharing their story with protecting Tyrell's privacy and well-being. One reporter asked Tyrell if he was still afraid to fly after what had happened. No, Tyrell answered honestly. What happened was because of one person's actions, not because of flying itself. I'm not going to let that stop me from seeing the world. Later that afternoon, as they were leaving the hotel, they ran into Howard Chen, the elderly man who had sat next to Tyrell on that fateful flight. Howard had become something of a grandfather figure to Tyrell over the past month, calling regularly to check on him and sharing stories from his own life experiences. "You did well up there, young man," Howard said, patting Tyrell's shoulder. "Your words will make a difference. Do you really think so?" Tyrell asked. "I know so," Howard replied. "Change happens when good people speak up." That's been true throughout history. As they parted ways, Tyrell thought about how strange it was that this terrible experience had brought such good people into his life. Howard, Nicole, David. They had all become extended family now, connected by their shared stand against injustice. That evening, back at his grandparents' house where they had extended their stay, the family gathered for a celebration dinner. Grandma Pearlie had cooked all of Tyrell's favorite foods, and Grandpa Joe had bought a cake with "Proud of You" written in blue icing. "So, what happens next?" Tyrell asked as they sat around the table. "Well," Lisa said, "the passenger advocacy program officially launches next week. I've been offered a position on their advisory board to help make sure they stay true to their commitments." "And what about school? When do we go home?" Tyrell had been doing remote learning for the past month, but he missed his friends. "We'll head home this weekend," Lisa told him. "Your principal called yesterday. The school wants to do an assembly about standing up against discrimination, and they're hoping you might say a few words." "But only if you want to," she added quickly. Tyrell considered this. A month ago, the thought of speaking in front of his whole school would have terrified him. But after everything that had happened, the videos going viral, the news interviews, and now the press conference talking to his schoolmates seemed less intimidating. "I think I could do that," he said with growing confidence. "You've changed," Grandma Pearlie observed, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and a touch of sadness. "You've grown up so much this past month. Is that a bad thing?" Tyrell asked. "No, baby," she assured him. "It's just that sometimes life forces us to grow up faster than we should have to, but you've handled it with more grace than most adults would have." After dinner, while the adults were talking in the living room, Tyrell stepped out onto the back porch for some fresh air. The evening was warm, with fireflies beginning to flicker in the gathering dusk. He thought about everything that had happened since that morning on the plane. The incident had been frightening and humiliating. The media attention had been overwhelming. But something good had come from it all. Real changes were happening. Not just the new advocacy program, but changes in how people thought and talked about these issues. Tyrell had received hundreds of messages from other kids who had faced similar discrimination. Some of them said his story had given them courage to speak up about their own experiences. Others said their parents had talked with them about racism. For the first time after seeing Tyrell's story on the news, he heard the porch door open behind him and turned to see Lisa, coming out to join him. "Penny, for your thoughts?" she asked, sitting down beside him on the porch steps. "I was just thinking about everything that's happened," Tyrell said. "It's weird, but in a way I'm almost glad it did. Not the bad part, but what came after. People coming together, things actually changing." Lisa nodded, putting her arm around his shoulders. "That's called finding meaning in suffering. And it's one of the most important skills in life. Bad things happen to everyone. What matters is what we do with those experiences." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fireflies dance in the gathering darkness. "You know what I'm most proud of?" Lisa said finally. "What?" "That through all of this, you stayed true to yourself. You didn't let anger take over. You didn't want revenge. You just wanted things to be better for everyone." Tyrell smiled. "Like Grandpa Joe always says, hate just makes more hate. He's a wise man, your grandfather." As they sat there on the porch steps, Tyrell felt a sense of peace settling over him. The past month had been a whirlwind of emotions and experiences, some painful, some empowering. But here, in this quiet moment with his aunt, he knew that whatever challenges came next, he was stronger now. Not just because he had stood up to injustice, but because he had seen firsthand the difference that speaking up could make. One person's actions had hurt him, but many people's actions had healed him. And now his own actions might help others. That, Tyrell decided, was something worth growing up a little faster for.